as we started out with yesterday, I summarized that the goal of this annual meeting usually has a focus, a topic, or a theme, if you will. And what we wanted to focus particularly on is what treatments do we have right now, but more importantly, where are the gaps? And then highlight a few developments that are in progress in our group and outside of our group. So we started with Cindy. She gave us an outstanding presentation on the botulinum toxins, which are very commonly used in this group of disorders. She talked about how they are used, the many various options, how they can be quite effective and really life-changing for some patients. But she also outlined a number of limitations that lead many patients to stop this therapy or at least not be terribly satisfied with it. Some of these advances are coming in the way of how we deliver the botulinum toxins, novel botulinum toxins that might have better properties than the ones we have now. And I think we're going to see a lot of new developments in the near future. My understanding is that there are actually two ongoing or recently completed clinical trials where the results haven't been released. There may be more that I don't know about. And so I think this is important development to keep track of because we're hoping to have new and better things in the near future. Then after Cindy finished, I gave a brief summary of the state of the art in oral medications used for common adult onset focal dystonias. And there are many, many limitations, which you probably all know. But I also highlighted a few strategies that are being used to find new opportunities and even some recent opportunities where these new drugs are being tested or have been tested. So in addition to needing good trial designs and instruments to address botulinum toxin studies, we also need good trial designs for thinking about oral medications for either those who are not on botulinum toxins or those who want to use these oral agents as add-on therapies, because often the botulinum toxins don't solve the problem completely. Then after me, Aparna Wagli-Shukla did a great presentation on surgical options and how they can also be quite dramatically effective, even life-saving for certain kinds of patients with dystonia, not all of them. So we have some room to go and understanding why some respond and some don't. And she also talked a lot about new developments in deep brain stimulation technologies. And those are other things that we are going to need to pay attention to for having good trial designs and strategies for testing when they become available. Johnny gave a great presentation also on what might be considered right now the current state of the art in terms of outcome measures for all of our dystonias. I'm just showing one picture here. This was published a couple of years ago with a small group of patients, and now it has been replicated in a larger and international population of patients. Gianni summarized some of those results for us, and it looks like this type of clinical rating scale works quite nicely and probably is better than some of the existing ones that we have available. But this is just one example that he presented. There were others that we have been using as well and will probably continue to use. Then Sarah talked about developing some novel tools that look more carefully at the patient perspective. You know, it's amazing to me sometimes how we as docs love certain medications and think they're like almost miracle drugs, and then the patients come and say, meh, it's okay, but it's not great. And she described the various reasons why one of our most effective options, botulinum toxins, are maybe not so always so ideal. We tend to see people in clinical trials at the peak of the effect, not necessarily when things are wearing off. And so we need devices and tools to measure this phenomenon, especially if we're going to be doing add-on therapies, to try and see if we can make this better. And that's a new development that we haven't had in the past, and it will promise to be a really, I think, valuable tool, not only for clinical trials, but I think also for patients to keep really accurate account and sort of a diary of their experience, a little bit like migraine headache diaries, which are so common in the headache world. And then Dave talked a little bit about the next generation of assessment tools that have been coming out. These are, I'm calling them digital outcome measures, but they have lots of other names, objective outcome measures, et cetera, et cetera. And he talked about a few of those. I'm just listing a few that are relevant to cervical dystonia here, some from digital video, some from wearable sensors. And these things can potentially be very valuable for monitoring patients' symptoms in a clinical trial, in a natural history study, but even for quantitative measurements of symptoms that might support biomarker studies, similar to the ones that Carlos described. So this is a space that's really developing now pretty rapidly and holds a lot of promise for future value in assessing not only diagnoses, but also severity. So just a brief summary, an executive style summary. I mean, I almost hate to put this type of summary in one slide, but I wanted to resist the temptation to give you a 10-slide progress report of what we've done. So I've summarized it really very briefly here. We grew from the beginning with 8 involved sites to now you can see more than 40 sites participating at different levels. As either recruiting centers, actually recruiting centers for patients participating in the various studies you heard about, but also affiliate centers for people who can't recruit but still want to be involved in some way, attend our meetings, see what we're doing, participate in some of the other opportunities. By now, we've completed multiple international studies, all of which addressed bottlenecks in clinical trial readiness in terms of diagnostic criteria, measurement tools, natural history, understanding the disorders better, biomarkers, et cetera. All of them have so far had international participation, and we're very proud of that. And we're certainly very pleased to have our international partners from Europe and Australia involved in these things. As you heard today, we've also seeded a number of smaller studies, 60 pilot projects, some of them with actual money behind them, other ones just with resources that we have collected or data. The most recent of those you heard about today. Carlos presented a very nice story about how we are making an effort to look for protein or proteomic biomarkers in the serum that could be helpful for the dystonias. Something that nobody has done before, a little bit surprising, but perhaps that's because we just haven't had a large enough bank of samples to be able to do it. And we also talked about the Career Award Program, and Dr. Bukhari Parlatar gave a very nice presentation about her award from last year about transcranial magnetic stimulation, where there's lots of things to do, lots of interesting things to learn, but potentially even with therapeutic potential. And by now we have more than 180 publications from our funding sources, and some of them have gone into very good places. So I think we should all be very proud of that so far. So that's my sort of executive summary in one slide since 2009. If you want to learn more, I think you all have seen this slide before. Gamza put together a description of who we are, why we came to be, what we're doing, and what we hope to do in the future, and why we have focused on clinical trial readiness as the next step for our research community. So if you want to know more, because I went way too fast, please have a look at this review, and you can get all the details you need from it. Okay, so as we conclude our 10th annual Dystonia Coalition meeting, I thought it would be good to mention that the 11th annual meeting will occur about next year, almost the same time in May 2023. And this is going to be held in conjunction with the Samuel Bellsberg International Dystonia Symposium, which many of you have probably already heard about. This is a very nice 2-day symposium that covers predominantly the scientific advances in the dystonia research community. And I mean all scientific advances, not just clinical and translational, but everything from basic sciences to translational clinical sciences. And that will be just following the annual meeting that we have next year. So by doing these together, we hope that more people will be able to attend both or either, all in the same place. And this particular international meeting is going to be held in Dublin, Ireland. So please mark your calendars. We would all love to see you there at these meetings so that we can finally meet face-to-face once again. All right, and I would like to again thank our sponsors. I think we've mentioned this a couple times before. The Dystonia Coalition is part of the Rare Diseases Clinical Research Network, which is organized through NCATS, the National Center for Advancing Translational Sciences, with our funding coming from the National Institutes of Neurological Disorders and Stroke, NINDS. And we are very grateful for all the support we have had from them over the years to build this network of researchers and patient advocacy group leaders and patients to be able to do what we've done so far. We've also had other support along the way that I should acknowledge, support from industry for very specific studies that they wanted us to do. I'm not going to give too much of a list here. We've also had some support from professional societies, such as the Movement Disorder Society. And as we already mentioned, Joel and I mentioned, the patient advocacy groups have played a huge role. Now, you heard from Janet and Kim, but we're very proud to have multiple different patient advocacy groups helping us in various ways, some financially, as we mentioned, some with patient recruitment, some with just advising us on what they think is important and telling us the kinds of studies that they feel are necessary. And members from these groups are always invited to our annual coalition meeting, but they're also invited, of course, to the Samuel Bellsberg International Congress that will be next year, and hope to be able to meet some of you. This list has changed a little bit over the years. It looks like kind of a long list, but it's not that many. Some of the groups have closed doors, other new ones have come along, and we welcome all of them. And finally, I'd like to thank a lot of the faces that are behind the scenes that many of you who are tuned in never get a chance to see. My guess is you may be getting some emails from them from time to time about what we're doing and deadlines and various bits of paperwork. So I thought I'd show them to you here in advance of your being able potentially to meet them at a real meeting. This is Gamza Kielik-Berkman, who works with me here at Emory. She's really the program manager and runs everything that we do and keeps me in line and makes sure I do what I'm supposed to be doing on time. usually. Then many of you probably also are familiar with this name, Jo Wright. She works with Dr. Perlmutter at WashU, and she's our essential data manager and QC checker who reviews everything that comes in and helps to try and keep all of that perfected as best possible. So great thanks goes out to Jo. And then someone that you may not have heard a lot from yet, but you probably will, is Jean M. Dubose. She works with Janet and others at the Dystonia Medical Research Foundation, and she's the face behind the webinar organization for today, getting everybody organized and in line and keeping things on track to make sure things are working, checking questions in chat, et cetera, et cetera. So a great thanks goes out to Jean M. and others at the DMRF for all the work that they do to make these kinds of things happen. It's really, really great. So thanks to all of you again.